Silence is mistaken for weakness because the world has grown addicted to noise, to explanations, to constant proof. And when you don't perform your pain or advertise your strength, people assume there is nothing there. They assume quiet means empty, that restraint means fear, that composure means you have nothing to say. But silence is often the place where the strongest decisions are made, where patience is built, where discipline replaces impulse. Silence is where you learn to listen instead of react, where you observe patterns instead of arguing with them, where you realize not every battle deserves your voice, not every opinion deserves your energy. Silence becomes a shield when words would only give others power over your emotions. It becomes a choice rather than an absence, a form of control rather than surrender. Silence allows you to move without being tracked, to grow without being interrupted, to heal without being judged. People mistake silence for weakness because they don't understand the strength it takes to stay calm when provoked, to remain respectful when disrespected, to hold back words that could wound, but would also chain you to regret. Silence teaches you that real confidence doesn't need to announce itself, that true power doesn't beg for attention. It stands firm even when ignored. Silence is where you learn to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it, where you process loss instead of numbing it, where you accept reality instead of fighting it. With excuses, people fear silence because it forces honesty, it removes distractions, it exposes intentions, and when you are silent, you can see clearly who speaks from insecurity and who speaks from purpose. Silence helps you understand that not everything requires a response, that reacting to every insult gives it value, that sometimes the strongest reply is improvement, growth, consistency. Silence is mistaken for weakness by those who rely on volume to feel important, who confuse aggression with strength and arrogance with confidence. But silence is where resilience is sharpened, where character is tested, where self-respect is preserved. It allows you to move through the world without being controlled by every external trigger. It gives you space to choose your battles wisely, to invest your voice only where it matters, to save your words for moments that require truth instead of noise. Silence is not the absence of power, it is the discipline of power. It is the understanding that you don't owe explanations to everyone, that your journey doesn't need constant narration, that progress doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like consistency, restraint, and quiet endurance. Silence protects your peace in a world that profits from your reaction. It teaches you to respond from clarity rather than emotion, to act from values rather than pressure. People may misunderstand your silence. They may project their own fears onto it, but misunderstanding is often the cost of maturity, because when you stop reacting the way they expect, they lose control. When you stop explaining yourself, you take your power back. Silence allows you to grow without permission, to evolve without applause, to remain grounded when chaos invites you to become loud. It becomes a language of self-respect, a boundary that says not everything deserves access to me, not everyone deserves my voice. And those who mistake silence for weakness often learn too late that quiet strength lasts longer than loud bravado. You hate me because I didn't collapse when you expected me to, because I stayed quiet when you were waiting for noise, because I chose dignity over drama and patience over revenge. Do you hate me because I walked through storms without announcing my suffering? Because I carried loss without turning it into a weapon? Because I learned to live with scars instead of showing them for sympathy? Do you hate me because I didn't explain myself when the world demanded justification? Because I accepted that not everyone will understand my journey, my pace, my silence, my restraint? Do you hate me because I kept moving forward even when the weight of grief sat heavy on my chest every morning? Because I didn't let pain turn me cruel? Because I didn't allow bitterness to replace kindness? Do you hate me because I learned that strength doesn't shout, it endures? Because I realized that survival isn't loud, it's consistent? Because I stopped begging for validation from people who only listen when you are broken? Do you hate me because I learned to sit alone without feeling empty? Because I discovered peace in being misunderstood? Because I accepted that sometimes walking away is not weakness but wisdom? Do you hate me because I refused to play the role you assigned to me? Because I stepped outside expectations? because I chose honesty over approval, because I stayed grounded while others chased applause? Do you hate me because I didn't let the worst moments of my life define the best parts of my character? Because I understood that pain can either consume you or teach you? Because I chose to learn? Do you hate me because I didn't harden my heart even after it was tested repeatedly? Because I still believe in respect, humility, and treating people gently even when they are not gentle with me? Do you hate me because I don't compete, I improve? Because I don't envy, I focus? Because I don't destroy, I build? Do you hate me because I accepted responsibility for my life instead of blaming the world? Because I stood back up quietly every time I was knocked down? Because I stopped explaining my growth to those committed to misunderstanding me? Do you hate me because I realized that not everyone deserves access to my energy, my story, my healing? Because I learned to protect my peace without becoming cold? Because I found balance between strength and softness? Do you hate me because I no longer react the way I used to? Because I pause, breathe, and choose? My response: because I value self-control more than momentary satisfaction. Do you hate me because I survived what should have destroyed me? Because I kept my humanity intact while walking through inhuman circumstances? Because I learned that respect begins with how you treat yourself when no one is watching? Do you hate me because I don't need to prove my worth loudly? Because I know who I am even when others don't? Because I understand that being underestimated is sometimes an advantage? Do you hate me because I chose growth over comfort? Because I embraced discipline when chaos was easier? Because I stayed true to my values when compromise was tempting? Do you hate me because I became someone my past no longer controls? Because I stopped living for approval and started living with purpose? Because I realized that the strongest answer to hate is not anger, but becoming better, calmer, wiser, more grounded? Because I kept going quietly, steadily, honestly, even when no one was cheering, even when no one was watching, even when the road felt endless. Though you hate me, that question can echo louder than any insult. It's the moment you look in the mirror and wonder if the world has already decided your worth before you even had a chance to prove it. There comes a time in life when you stop asking for approval and start demanding truth, when rejection no longer breaks you but sharpens you, when pain doesn't make you bitter, it makes you clear. You realize that being misunderstood is not a weakness. It's often the price of being different. If they doubt you, let them. If they judge you, let them. Because the strongest people don't rise by being loved by everyone. They rise by staying true when love is missing. Today, this is not about being liked. This is about becoming unstoppable. Being different invites judgment because conformity makes people comfortable and authenticity challenges them. When you step outside the expected path, it forces others to question their own choices, their own fears, their own compromises, and not everyone is ready for that reflection. Judgment becomes a defense mechanism, a way to label what they don't understand so they don't have to confront it. Being different means you move at a pace that doesn't match the crowd. You value things others overlook. You choose depth over display, purpose over popularity. And that difference stands out in a world that rewards sameness. People judge because difference disrupts their sense of normal. It exposes the fact that there are multiple ways to live, multiple definitions of success, and that realization can feel threatening. Being different often means standing alone before you ever stand strong. It means being misunderstood before being respected, judged before being trusted, because society is quicker to criticize what it can't categorize. When you don't follow the script, people try to write one for you. They project intentions, assume arrogance, and mistake independence for isolation. But being different is not about rejecting others, it's about accepting yourself fully. Even when that acceptance comes without applause, judgment follows difference because comfort seeks familiarity and difference refuses to be familiar. It asks questions without speaking. It challenges norms without shouting. It lives honestly in a world that often survives on performance. Being different means you become visible in ways you didn't ask for. Your choices are watched more closely. Your mistakes are magnified. Your silence is analyzed because deviation attracts attention. But judgment loses its power when you understand its source. Most criticism is rooted in fear, envy, or insecurity, not truth. Being different teaches you resilience. It forces you to build self-trust instead of relying on approval. It pushes you to define your own standards. When external validation is withheld, judgment becomes background noise when purpose becomes clear. Because once you know why you're walking a certain path, the opinions of those who aren't walking with you lose relevance. Being different sharpens discernment. It helps you recognize who respects your individuality and who only tolerates it until it challenges them. Judgment reveals character, not yours, but theirs. It shows who needs you to be smaller so they can feel bigger, who needs you to fit in so they don't have to change. Being different requires courage because it invites resistance, but that resistance is often proof that you are not living on autopilot. It means you are choosing intentionally rather than drifting. And while judgment can be isolating, it also filters your circle. It removes those who only support versions of you that are convenient. Being different is not a flaw to correct. It is a strength to protect, because progress has always been led by those willing to be judged before they were understood. And peace often belongs to those who stop trying to look normal and start trying to live honestly. Pain teaches what comfort never can, because comfort keeps you still while pain forces movement. Comfort wraps you in familiarity, but pain strips away illusion. It removes what is unnecessary and exposes what is essential. When life is easy, you don't question much, you don't look deeply, you don't strengthen parts of yourself that only awaken under pressure. Pain arrives uninvited and unwelcome, but it demands attention. It interrupts routines and challenges beliefs you thought were unbreakable. Pain teaches you patience because healing cannot be rushed. It teaches humility because suffering does not discriminate. It teaches empathy because once you've hurt deeply, you recognize it in others without words. Comfort makes you assume tomorrow is guaranteed. Pain reminds you that nothing is permanent, not people, not stability, not certainty. Pain teaches you resilience by forcing you to adapt, to survive, to rebuild when familiar structures collapse. It teaches you boundaries by showing you what you can no longer tolerate, who drains you, what costs too much of your peace. Comfort allows avoidance. Pain demands confrontation. It brings buried emotions to the surface, unresolved grief, unspoken truths, ignored needs. And while that exposure is uncomfortable, it is also cleansing. Pain teaches clarity by removing distractions. Suddenly, what matters becomes obvious and what doesn't fades quickly. It teaches self-reliance because at some point you realize no one can carry this for you. Support may exist, but the work is personal. Pain teaches gratitude, not for the suffering itself, but for the strength discovered because of it. Comfort never asks who you really are when everything is taken away. Pain does. It teaches you how to sit with yourself without escape, how to face silence without fear, how to endure without losing integrity. Pain teaches discipline because recovery requires consistency, small choices repeated daily, not dramatic gestures. Comfort rarely builds character, it maintains it at best. Pain reshapes it, refines it. Pain teaches acceptance, not the kind that gives up, but the kind that understands reality before trying to change it. It teaches you that some losses cannot be fixed, only carried with dignity. It teaches you forgiveness, not because others deserve it, but because carrying resentment makes the pain heavier. Comfort encourages complacency, pain encourages growth. It forces you to reevaluate priorities, to let go of false identities, to rebuild from truth instead of habit. Pain teaches you to respect yourself because you learn what it costs to ignore your needs, your limits, your voice. It teaches you that strength is not the absence of suffering, but the ability to move forward without letting suffering define you. Comfort may feel safer, but pain educates deeply, permanently, shaping wisdom that cannot be taught through ease or convenience. Or respect yourself when no one else does, because external validation is unstable and relying on it leaves you vulnerable to every shift in opinion. When respect disappears from others, the real test begins internally. This is where character is either strengthened or surrendered. Self-respect means holding your standards even when they are not rewarded, treating yourself with dignity, Even when you are treated unfairly, it means not participating in your own degradation just to be accepted. When no one else respects you, it becomes tempting to lower your values, to seek approval through compromise, to stay silent where your integrity is being challenged. But self-respect asks you to walk away rather than beg, to remain calm rather than retaliate, to stand firm rather than conform. Respecting yourself in isolation requires honesty. It means acknowledging your flaws without letting them define your worth. It means taking responsibility without accepting blame that isn't yours. Self-respect is built in private moments when no one is watching and no applause is given. It is choosing consistency over convenience, discipline over comfort, truth over popularity. When others fail to respect you, it reveals their limitations, not your value. But without self-respect, their behavior can begin to shape how you see yourself. That is why self-respect must come first. It becomes the foundation that cannot be shaken by neglect or criticism. Respecting yourself means protecting your time, your energy, your mental space. It means saying no without guilt and yes with intention. It means not over-explaining your choices to people committed to misunderstanding you. Growth often looks like loneliness because change separates you from familiar versions of yourself and from people who were only comfortable with who you used to be. When you begin to grow, your priorities shift, your boundaries strengthen, your tolerance for chaos decreases, and not everyone can follow you. Through that transition, loneliness appears not because you are unworthy of connection, but because you are no longer aligned with certain patterns, habits, or conversations. Growth requires time alone to reflect, to unlearn, to rebuild, and that solitude can feel heavy before it feels purposeful. When you stop seeking constant distraction, you start hearing your own thoughts clearly, and that clarity can be uncomfortable. Growth isolates before it connects because transformation demands focus. It pulls energy inward so it can be redirected intentionally. Loneliness becomes a space where discipline is formed, where values are clarified, where resilience is tested without external reassurance. People often misunderstand this phase and assume something is wrong, but solitude is not emptiness, it is preparation. Growth removes relationships that were built on convenience rather than respect, on familiarity rather than understanding, and that pruning can feel like loss, even when it creates room for healthier connections. Loneliness teaches you to rely on your own stability rather than external support. It strengthens self-trust and emotional independence. Growth often requires you to walk ahead of the crowd before the path becomes visible to others, and walking ahead means walking alone for a while. This loneliness sharpens discernment. It shows you who supports your evolution and who resists it, who respects your boundaries and who benefited from their absence. Growth demands patience because results are not immediate, and in that waiting period, solitude can feel like stagnation. Even when progress is happening internally, loneliness becomes part of the process, not the destination. It is the quiet phase where strength consolidates, where habits take root, where identity stabilizes. Growth changes how you relate to yourself, and that internal shift can create distance from those who only knew the older version of you. But that distance is not failure, it is evidence of movement. Growth often looks like loneliness because you are becoming someone new before the world catches up. And learning to stand comfortably in that space is part of becoming grounded, disciplined, and genuinely free. Healing is not linear because progress does not move in a straight line and strength does not arrive all at once. There are days when you feel grounded and clear, and days when old wounds resurface without warning, not because you are failing, but because healing uncovers layers that were protected by time and distraction. Growth reveals pain before it resolves it, and that revelation can feel like regression even when it is movement forward. Healing asks you to sit with emotions you once avoided, to feel what you once buried, and that process is uneven. Some days you move with confidence, other days you pause under the weight of memory. But pauses are not setbacks, they are moments of integration. Healing teaches patience by refusing to be rushed. It reminds you that recovery is not about erasing the past, but learning how to carry it without letting it control you. There are moments when progress feels invisible because healing often happens internally before it shows externally. Habits change before feelings do. Boundaries strengthen before peace arrives. Healing requires compassion toward yourself when old reactions appear, when fatigue returns, when motivation dips. It teaches you that resilience is not constant intensity, but consistent return, coming back to your values even after drifting, choosing self-respect even after moments of doubt. Healing exposes patterns so they can be broken, and exposure can be uncomfortable. It can feel like reopening wounds, when in reality you are cleaning them. Healing does not mean you stop feeling pain. It means pain no longer decides your direction. Some lessons repeat until they are learned fully, and repetition is not punishment. It is reinforcement. Healing is nonlinear because humans are complex. Memory is layered and identity evolves through experience. Progress shows up as shorter recoveries, clearer boundaries, quieter reactions. Even when emotions still rise, healing asks you to trust the process without constant evidence, to keep showing up for yourself even when results are subtle. It teaches you that strength includes vulnerability, that stability includes fluctuation, that becoming whole is not about perfection but persistence. Healing moves in cycles because each return brings deeper understanding, more awareness, more control. And with each cycle, you carry less weight, respond with more clarity, and stand with greater self-trust. Letting go is not weakness because release requires more courage than holding on. Holding on is familiar even when it hurts. It gives the illusion of control, but letting go asks you to accept uncertainty, to trust yourself without guarantees, to step forward without dragging the weight of what no longer serves you. Letting go is not forgetting. It is choosing not to be ruled by what has already happened. It is understanding that some chapters end without explanation, without closure, without fairness, and waiting for perfect answers only keeps you tied to the past. Letting go means recognizing when effort becomes self-betrayal, when loyalty turns into self-neglect, when hope turns into denial. It is the moment you stop negotiating with pain and start choosing peace. People often confuse letting go with giving up, but giving up abandons responsibility while letting go reclaims it. It says, I will no longer allow this to define me, control me, drain me. Letting go teaches acceptance, not passive acceptance, but grounded acceptance of reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. It requires honesty about what you cannot change and discipline to focus on what you can. Letting go creates space, and space is necessary for growth, healing, clarity. Without space, new strength cannot enter, new perspective cannot form. Holding on keeps wounds open. Letting go allows them to close, even if scars remain. And scars are not failures, they are proof of survival. Letting go also means releasing versions of yourself that were shaped by pain, identities built around survival rather than purpose. It means forgiving yourself for what you tolerated when you didn't know better. Letting go frees energy that was trapped in resentment, regret, replaying old moments. It redirects that energy toward building something steadier, healthier, more aligned. It does not happen all at once. It happens in choices, daily decisions to stop checking, stop chasing, stop explaining, stop reliving. Letting go teaches you that peace is not found by fixing the past, but by releasing your grip on it. That strength is not measured by how much you endure, but by how wisely you choose what to carry. And when you let go, you are not losing something, you are returning to yourself, lighter, clearer, and no longer defined by what you had to survive you. Don't owe everyone access to you because availability is not the same as kindness, and boundaries are not cruelty. When you give unlimited access, people often confuse generosity with entitlement. They begin to believe your time, your energy, your attention exists for their convenience, but access is earned through respect, not proximity, not history, not obligation. Learning to limit access is part of self-preservation. It is recognizing that not everyone who wants to be close deserves to be close. Some people come to consume, not to support, to benefit, not to build, and allowing them unrestricted access slowly drains your clarity, your patience, your sense of self. Protecting access does not mean becoming cold or distant. It means becoming intentional, choosing who is allowed to influence your thoughts, your emotions, your direction. When you restrict access, you begin to hear yourself again. Your needs become clearer. Your values stop being diluted by constant noise. People may react negatively when access is reduced, not because you are wrong, but because they were comfortable benefiting from your openness without responsibility. Resistance often appears when boundaries are introduced, but that resistance is information. It reveals who respected you and who only enjoyed what you provided. Limiting access teaches you discernment. It helps you separate genuine connection from convenience. It allows relationships to be based on mutual respect rather than availability. You are not required to explain every boundary or justify every withdrawal. Sometimes distance is the explanation. Sometimes silence is the boundary. Protecting access allows you to invest energy where it is reciprocated, where growth is supported, where honesty is valued. It prevents burnout, resentment, emotional exhaustion, and self-betrayal. Access is a privilege because influence shapes identity, and when too many voices have influence, direction becomes blurred. Limiting access is an act of respect toward yourself. It is choosing quality over quantity, depth over familiarity, alignment over obligation. You are allowed to change who has access as you grow, as you heal, as your priorities evolve, because the version of you that survived chaos may not be the version that sustains peace. And guarding access is how you protect that peace without apology.